Hello and welcome back to another video of Finding Freedom. Now, this is part 2 of how to go legit away from crime, obviously. Well, in this one, we're going to talk about how to make money gambling. Don't worry, I'm not talking about Vegas. But if you ever heard of an application called DraftKings, now, I don't know if you ever heard of the draft. Obviously, those from Vietnam get misconstrued and they think, oh, military draft. No, DraftKings is like a betting app, so on and so forth, but it strictly talks about betting. So what we're going to do is talk about other legalities, just like in the last video, so you could be legit and do the right thing and be a good guy instead of a bad guy. So first things first, you're going to have to create an application. Well, with AI, artificial intelligence, there is a platform called Replit. Replit is a platform in which helps you develop apps, a course with other things, so on and so forth. But if you heard a Freudian slip, don't worry. It's just the electromagnetic spectrum or EMS tampering with some stuff. So there might be some discrepancies, but we'll work on that. So use Replit. Replit will help you create an application, then have somebody who's familiar with applications make sure that it's functional. Now, before I get into anything else, I want to go ahead and say that this is for educational purposes only. Do not break the law, right? And that's the purpose of this video, is to educate you on how not to break the law, but to work within the confines of the law, right? Because there's a difference between profiteering and making a profit. Remember, back in the day, they used to hire privateers to do things outside of jurisdiction, and that was profiteering, right? Because they would say, I don't know what happened, plausible deniability. Whereas in the confines of the law, to be a legitimate business, you could still make a profit, so on and so forth. If you've seen Pirates of the Caribbean, this strongly represents that. And then, of course, if they ever got caught, they would get a tattoo on them with the letter P on their wrist or whatever, or something like that, right? So this is a way to go legit, right? Now, what you want to understand is different tax strategies. You can be a sole proprietor, meaning all the liability and onus and everything else is on you, which means if you get a lawsuit in your business or whatever else, they could come after you, your property, and everything else that you own. If you establish an LLC, that is different. It establishes other legal protections under the law and jurisdictions that which that business resides in. So if they're trying to pierce the corporate veil, then of course you can go ahead and establish in a certain entity or area in which that has certain protections for that as well, for anonymity purposes. Now, if I'm going too fast, you can always hit the speed button on YouTube and you can slow this down or speed it up to catch up. So let's continue. Now, when it comes to strategy and taxes, remember, in business, it's backwards than personal. So if you're dealing with business, you get taxed after your expenses are handled. And then, of course, in personal taxes, you get your taxes taken out before you get your check. Remember that. It's important. So let's say you have a server location for your application, so on and so forth, because you want to handle everything in-house to prevent hackers or nefarious people or those little sneaky critters that like to sneak in like rats and stuff like that, right? Because although, I'm close to the Tar Heel state, right? Because tar, if you jumble up the letter a rat, can spell that as well, will, benefit you in the long run, because, well, then who was on your property, who was messing with your servers, how they get into your system, so on and so forth. And it'll be really easy because it'll mitigate the risk of outsourcing certain things, keeping a closed loop within the business. Now, remember that, because for tax purposes, you're going to have to pay these people, and there's a difference between COGS, which is the cost of goods sold, and in order to run an online application or software as a service, otherwise known as SaaS, then you are going to go ahead and have to, hire people that work with your servers, do security, etc. You might want to pay them hourly, so on and so forth. They would fall underneath COGS, whereas salary would fall underneath expenses. So when businesses, even large corporate entities, decide to cut people, they normally get rid of those who are on salary, that are, either lazy or at the bottom 10% or 15% of the company, who normally don't actually pull their weight, if that makes sense. So let's continue. Now, look out for the little guy. So when it comes to gaming, you want to, gamify learning, right? So what does that mean, gamify learning? Elon Musk talked about this along with a couple other people. You can gamify learning such as, there's another Freudian slip for you, such as civics, humanities, so on and so forth, etc. And you were able to play things like Oregon Trail and Civilizations and SimCity and understand the industrial complex within SimCity and the commercial space, so on and so forth, and the residential space, how to lay out the terrain, so on and so forth, etc. Right? And give people zones in which to build, making sure that you can, well, mitigate pollution. Of course, you need the industrial section, but is it light industrial, heavy, dense industrial, so on and so forth, dark yellow, light blue, dark blue, green, so on and so forth, etc. Now that's coming from SimCity 2000. I don't know if the colors have changed in the new vernacular or structure in which we're playing this game, but we could go ahead and figure that out later. But this was just an example of how you can gamify learning, right? Because you also had to balance taxes, inflation, pollution. Now you got to hire more people to take care of that. You don't have enough police departments because fires are breaking out because people are getting taxed too heavily and all this other stuff. So now you have to spend more money, blah, 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 blah. So let's get into it. Remember, always look out for the little guy. And the little guy is not the person that I'm talking about as you are thinking, like children, so on and so forth. The little guy is the person below you, the person to the right or next to you who has less experience, or the person to the right or left of you that might one day cover your ass. So remember that, because one day you're going to need somebody to wipe your butt. Anyways. Now, when you're setting this up, remember, a lot of applications like ChatGPT, who's underneath heavy scrutiny right now due to lawsuits along with other AI platforms, careful, so on and so forth, which is why I say you should work within the confines of the law, right? You shouldn't cut corners, as they say. So you want to first establish a monthly recurring revenue structure, MRR for short, right? So what is a monthly recurring revenue? Well, that is a monthly fee, right? And I'll get into that as an example later. Right now, I just need you to listen, not hear, but listen, right? And so MRR is different than ARR, right? Annual recurring revenue, right? And revenue is different than profit. Remember that. You guys all know this, but if you all know this, then why are you in school unless you operate based off of degrees? So what is 6 degrees of separation? I don't know. Go ask Will Smith or watch his movie. Let me continue. Now, when you're getting into this, I don't know if you understand who Ray Dalio is, but they call him the Da Vinci of the finance world, right? So understanding the exchange of value when it comes to money, right? Now, this can be found in Changing World Order, chapter 4. There's no real section in there, but you want to, well, look at chapter 4 within that book. So you can go to a bookstore or purchase Ray Dalio, or go onto Amazon, purchase the book, or wherever you want to find it, and go ahead and purchase it. And then you'll also understand other things like economics and things that he's talked about, because in order to be at his level, well, you have to understand pattern recognition and a couple other things. So it would behoove you to actually read it. It's very beneficial. If you don't want to read, you can download the audiobook, listen to it while you're driving or chilling, so on and so forth, etc., whether you're on a beach or you're taking an Uber or a Lyft somewhere. So let's get into it. So the next point, right? Understanding the exchange, right? This pen is not valuable until it becomes valuable, right? Well, why would it be valuable, right? Well, what's special about it, right? Because the Wolf of Wall Street would say, sell me this pen, and everybody says it, right? And it's this whole joke. But what does it mean exactly? Now, a long time ago, no, I don't have a lighter on me. A long time ago, because of my martial arts background, I used to carry a Bic lighter, right? A decent sized one, right? And I had someone, and of course, every once in a while, I'll light up a stogie when I'm hanging out with the boys or if I'm chilling by myself on my break or whatever. But I was with someone and she did not like that. And she automatically saw the lighter and just thought, oh, you're a smoker. I don't like smokers. Bye. And then I quickly had to understand, okay, she doesn't like smokers and she doesn't understand everything that can be utilized with this one thing, right? So if you don't know what a Kubotan is, I go ahead and do some research. It's a self-defensive tool, right? And you could use a Bic lighter as such, so on and so forth. And you could do a couple other things with it as well, similar to, well, a simple pen or pencil. right? Because let's face it, graphene is out there and graphite goes into a pencil, and you can look up what graphene is worth as well as its capabilities in the scientific world. Let's continue. So, is this pen valuable? Probably not. But if you were working on a car and you were taking notes and it just happened to be late at night, and I showed you that this pen lit up, right? Could you not look around the engine with the pen that would light up, right? Because you could get further, faster. You could even tie a string to the end of this, right? And then you could drop it in like a fishing hook, right? So on and so forth. And you could look to see if anything's down there. And then, of course, you could swing it to the left or the right as the pendulum swings, as they say. And you can check, the surroundings, the engines, are there any leaks, so on and so forth, annotate that or keep it noted in a book or notebook. As you can see, I have one right here. And then, of course, from there, let's say you're an Uber driver. Well, an Uber driver has to keep their phone mounted, right? And you can't move it while you're in action, right? But you have to stop immediately. But what happens if, let's say, your passenger changes direction, or you don't have a smart vehicle, right? So on and so forth, etc. Well, then on the back of this pen, you actually have a stylus feature, right? And you can utilize that with any touchscreen phone, whether if it's a cheap $50 phone from Walmart or a iPhone, so on and so forth. So it becomes very versatile the more you start to think outside of the box or utilize critical thinking, right? Don't think quickly, right? Remember, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People dictates that most people listen, or should I say, hear to respond instead of listening to understand. So now this video and this pen, so on and so forth, became more valuable because, well, you learned about taxes, right? It touched on that. It showed you, well, monthly reoccurring revenue. It tapped into culture with movie culture and references that you should know by now. And it gave you an example of how to utilize a simple pen, right? So let's continue. Now, when it comes to that, most people might have heard penny, but let's say pen, because Lincoln sits behind bars for a reason, so please keep talking, right? Omission is a crime. So let's get into it. Now, when it comes to exchanging value, what makes that pen valuable? Well, everything I said makes it valuable. A standardized Bic pen that doesn't have a light, that doesn't have a stylus, that doesn't have any other capabilities, well, doesn't have that much value in comparison to the pen. Now, if you're into the healthcare space, you know what a tracheotomy is. This is a hollow tube. If you were to unscrew this part, take out the ink stick, so on and so forth, etc., take off this part, break it off. If you have a knife, cut it off immediately. Then use that knife to go ahead and create a puncture in the esophagus, so on and so forth. You could plug this into it, and you have a makeshift tracheotomy, right? And normally a hole that goes here, so on and so forth, so that people can breathe in case there is some type of reaction for you first responders out there. Let's continue. What is valuable about your platform? Not just making money. See, how do I say this? In other words, what's the upside, right? Instead of people putting their own money and hard-earned time, because you trade time for money, whether what level you're at, unless you're project-based, then that's a little different, but you're still trading time for money. So if you're trading time for money, what is the upside of them doing business with you? Let's do a mic check real quick. We're good. Now, the upside, well, how do you mitigate risk when it comes to that? Because, well, DraftKings, people bet money, they lose money, and then they get into this vicious cycle, right? But there's no added benefit even if they walk away with a loss. So, yeah, they're making money. They're probably, their books are probably balanced, so on and so forth, etc. But there's nothing of value outside of the entertainment aspect of it, right? So you want to remember to always provide value as a service. And because you have an application, this was being known as software as a service, otherwise shortened down to SaaS. If you are, well, how do I say this? Offended by the way my mannerisms are, because you look, or I think you look, so on and so forth, flamboyant or metrosexual. Well, I'm trying to get a point across. Does it fucking matter? Probably not. So remember, always to provide service as, or value when you're providing a service. Remember, sports is not a service, right? It's entertainment, right? The people, the athletes on the field are providing a service. Those that are watching are getting entertained, right? Those that are betting on it are getting entertainment or enjoyment out of it. Similar to watching Bluey, for crying out loud. All right? So let's move forward, right? when it comes to BO, right? BO, right? So benefits and opportunities, so on and so forth, etc. You want to apply the golden compass rule. What is the golden compass rule? Well, for short, you could call it the golden rule, right? Do unto others, so on and so forth. If you give value, value is returned, right? Because Grant Cardone normally dictates that if value exceeds price, then what is it? If value exceeds price, then price doesn't matter. Well, if that's true, then that can stay in. But if it's not further explained, then if people win on a platform because they took a risk, chance, or whatever, then yeah, it's valuable in an essence, but they're not getting anything if they lose, right? So let's continue. If you provide value, is that being a bad thing, right? Probably not, right? Because you're providing value, right? And if you provide value, it's not a bad thing because it's still giving somebody something. It's like going to college and dropping out. They still got value, did they not? Now, this is where we're going to tie everything together and why I mentioned college or school or whatever. Unless you go into specified fields, they don't teach you about probability and statistics, which is heavily utilized in gambling, right? So on and so forth. So with this, you can teach probability and statistics. Wait one for the wind to pass. It's a little hot outside, so it feels good to catch a breeze or get fresh air every once in a while for you fans of fresh air out there, or air that's fresh. So let's continue. Probability and statistics. Well, you know the probability. What are the chances of me winning? What are the chances of this? What are this? And then what's the statistics say? How do you analyze this? How do you analyze this, right? How do you look at data and analytics, the statistics, the numbers, and calculate on the fly or with pen and paper or with some assistance? Right? So you can have a different tiered structure within your application, right? So remember to always consult with an attorney, consult with a professional, and make sure that you have a CFO. Wait one. Sounds like the truck is passing gas right now. Anyways, I think those are the air brakes. Anyways, let's keep going. So when it comes to this, right, you want to teach probability and statistics and then break it down based off of tiers, right? So what do I mean by tiers? T-I-E-R, which is a tier, which is like a level, right? So listen to understand, don't listen to respond and be an asshole, because you'll have flatulence come out of there, and you don't want that because that'll be an abomination. Let's continue. Now, lower levels can have assistance, right? But lower rewards. You want to incentivize learning, right? So a tiered learning structure, let's say you have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, level 1, 2, and 3, right? See, the other tier is T-E-A-R, right? Because they hear something and it causes tears, or they see something and it causes tears. But in the business, in the context that which we are speaking and discussing in, it's spelled differently. That's why you should pay attention. So let's talk about it. The first level, as an example, and you can model this yourself. This is all free. It's going on YouTube anyways. I don't get paid for this, so on and so forth. Plus, I don't have enough subscribers to do that. But if you watch this and share it with your friends discreetly, or whatever the case may be, well, then maybe you can change the world somehow, right? You just got advice from some weird, strange guy that's slightly bald or very bald, depending on the day, if I shave or not. And yeah, we'll go from there. So, free with assistance, starting with, well, let's say a $5 fee, right? It's not hard, right? You deposit $5. Now that gives you a certain amount of credits, right? The same structure is used in Microsoft video games, right? So they could go ahead and buy equipment or applications on the phone that, you know, people play, like Candy Crush and all this other stuff. You can get more stuff if you pay more money. Well, if they want to gamble, so on and so forth, well, at the free level, they would have to make a $5 deposit, so on and so forth. We're not going to go into this meaning, but there's a president on there somehow who sits behind bars. But if it's free and they are willing to, well, put $5 there instead of $5 in coffee, so on and so forth, and learn about probability and statistics, you can have a platform or a video section that teaches probability and statistics to educate them on how to utilize not only the platform, but possibly win in whatever platform that you're utilizing to, well, as they would say, gamble or whatever on whatever it is that's on there, right? Because it's now an educational platform with incentivized learning in case people can't afford to go to college or school. So let's continue. Now, a next level up would be, well, a $15 a month, right? And that would be, well, with partial help or assistance, so on and so forth. Think about like using a calculator on a math test, or your phone, or AI, or something of the sort, right? This would be partial. You could use it if you want to, but they already know, so you might as well, give them the benefit of the doubt, etc., right? Next level will be $25 a month. Now, $25 a month would be minimal help. Now, why would it be minimal help? Well, because they should be educated in probability and statistics, and you should be able to, well, have a two-factor authorization feature. So if they utilize their phone or they're playing on their phone, they would have to log in through, well, whatever account. Or if they're on their laptop, they can go ahead and then ping their phone, so on and so forth, and then the phone can go ahead and sync up to the game to make sure that there's checks and balances between the laptop and the phone. So that's one way to build in what I guess would be security, or like a security certificate or something like that, or like the way you have HTTPS or use SSL certificates, whatever the case may be. Right? Now, the most advanced and most expensive option is going to be $150 a month. Oh, give them one, right? The reason why is because there's no help allowed, and it's proctored. What does that mean? Not Procter and Gamble, right? But proctored, right? Meaning that there is somebody watching, a monitor, somebody on screen that they can see that gets paid to sit there for quality assurance purposes and watch them as they're, moving through the game and doing and placing everything. Now, that's fair, right? Because, well, life isn't really that fair, but neither is, well, making money or doing a lot of other things. Now, when you take a test that is, well, let's say the ASVAB, SATs, ACTs, whatever the case may be, even in lower grades, right? That's why you get Scantrons and everybody gets a different test, right? It's normally proctored, and the teacher normally has a teacher's assistant or somebody else there, or multiple people in the room to watch you, so on and so forth, to see if you are cheating, which is the definition of being proctored. So the proctored portion would also come with the security feature of the phone, as well as the laptop, as well as somebody on screen through a video cam, Skype, or whatever the case may be, right? Or you can use Google Teams or whatever the case, Zoom, if you want to play that, right? And then you would have them in like the top right corner, the top left corner, so on and so forth, so that they're visible, right? And then, of course, they could go ahead and do things accordingly, right? Because in the world of gambling, it's very similar, but it's in a shorter time frame. So, like, for instance, if I were to use marketing for an example, right, and we were getting into paid media, I would have to spend the money first and then wait over time to see how effective the advertisements were, and then read the probability and the statistics of, well, is the advertising working? What does the analytics say? Who's responding? Male, female? Does the creative work for more males? Does the creative work for more females? Does the copy work for more males? Does it work for more females? Does it work for which age brackets? It's very complex, the shit that I'm saying, but it seems easy, right? Sounds easy, but it's not, because I have to take all those numbers, and if I have to make tweaks, right? If you are not a full stack marketer, or you understand what I'm talking about, and then I have to explain it in a simple format for either the clients or the rest of the team to make adjustments. So I have to take all those numbers, right, and everything that I saw, and then I have to go to the creative team and say, all right, look, check this out. This, and this is not doing right. This, and this is not doing right. These are the places that we're getting results from. Can we design for this? Now, you don't need to be an architect or have a certificate, so you can get the letter A next to your name, but you have to understand design, right? And you have to be able to build it, right? So you have to go ahead and, well, then convert those numbers into images, videos, and words that are going to work when you do the advertisements. Now, here's the key thing. When those advertisements work, because they normally do sometimes, then they get taken to either a website, a store, or directed somewhere. So I have to see where the gaps are within the process of the funnel when it comes to marketing, right? Oh, well, I did advertising and it didn't work. Okay, so what have you done that's worked and what hasn't worked? Well, I did this, I paid this person a lot of money and it still didn't work. Okay, that's one thing, but what did they do specifically? You could pay people money, they can back themselves up because they're very intelligent in that field, right? And say, well, I did the creative, I did the copy, I did the other stuff, it just didn't work. Why? Were you trying to understand, or were you just trying to put $1 in your pocket? So this is why copying and pasting the same template for multiple clients doesn't work, and it lowers the exchange of value when you charge a monthly fee. If you go to a more customized level, right, then you can charge more because it's going to take more work, not only to understand the client, the ideal client avatar, the business structure, the unique selling proposition, how you're going to position it, what's the pricing at, do we got to make adjusting to pricing, do we have to go ahead and understand the people, do we have to understand how this is going to work, so on and so forth, because it's a intricate thing. It's a puzzle piece that literally somebody took, slammed on the ground because it's in their head, and now we got to help them put the puzzle pieces together, right? Because if not, they're just throwing money down a hole. I don't know if you got that reference, but I think I said enough things where some people might have picked up on what I was laying down. So let's continue. Now, don't forget to go ahead and look at platforms that can help you establish an LLC or an S Corp, whatever. I strongly suggest starting off with an LLC. 1, it's cheaper. 2, it's very beneficial. 3, it provides a legal protection so people can't come after you and your property and pretty much rape you from behind, so on and so forth, etc. And if you're into fencing, that's a sword, a type of sword, rapier, if that makes sense, so on and so forth. So don't take offense to the terminology. Listen to understand before responding and getting triggered because you heard a keyword, right? And keywords are utilized within marketing, otherwise noted as what? Search engine optimization, right? So let's continue, right? And we're going to wrap this up in a second. So if you got any value out of this, so on and so forth, or you got any ideas, right, to create your own blue ocean, etc., right, to create your own business, to go legit, right, and create a value-based proposition, well, is that a bad thing? Did you break the law? Did you make money? Did they learn something? Did they make money in the process with it? Probably. That's called giving back and paying it forward, ladies and gentlemen. So go ahead and consult with professionals. Do your research. Do what's known in real estate as due diligence. If you hire an inspector to check out your house, make sure they carry out proper due diligence, etc. That may be an homage to somebody, but we won't talk about that. But you understand the reference. So, anyways, last thing, and I very strongly suggest this before somebody gets audited, make sure you hire somebody that is good with finances. You do not need anybody cooking the books. You don't want anybody playing with gray areas of accounting, using their phalanges to finagle, right? You want to make sure you're above board, not punching above your weight, but above board. Why? Because every business has a board of directors, and when a company gets sued, the chairman of the board gets sued, who sits above the board. Remember that. So until next time, my friends, take care, have a good one, and have a great freaking day. Mwah! Peace.